You're probably convinced you've seen every celebrity pivot in the book, but what if I told you the most brilliant, unverified empire-building blueprint in modern sports history allegedly unfolded while the entire planet was looking the other way, and the exact moment the trap snapped shut on a multi-billion-dollar industry is something we are going to unpack second by second right now. According to insiders, a former boy band heartthrob has legally and methodically positioned himself at the absolute nexus of luxury golf, real estate, media, and talent management. And if you click away before the final reveal, you will completely miss the one strategic masterstroke that business schools will probably be dissecting a decade from now. The story starts in the early 2010s when One Direction wasn't just a band, it was a cultural tsunami generating revenues that, sources claim, rivaled the GDP of small nations. But behind those synchronized harmonies and sold-out stadiums was a pressure cooker that reportedly pushed every single member to their psychological limits. While his bandmates navigated the chaotic tabloid circus of Hollywood nightlife, Niall Horan was doing something so quietly counterintuitive that the media totally misinterpreted it as a retreat. He was disappearing into ultra-exclusive, heavily guarded golf courses, but not in the way a stressed-out 20-something seeks a weekend hobby. According to multiple reports, he was studying the grid, the membership pricing models, the sponsorship architectures, the demographic fault lines that ancient executives had lazily ignored since the Eisenhower administration. And inside that silent observation, a massive, unanswered question started taking shape. Why is an $80 billion global industry marketing itself like it's still 1954? And what would happen if someone finally pumped 1 billion watts of modern attention into those sleepy fairways? Here's your first tiny hit of satisfaction. Horan apparently didn't just see the gap, he reportedly measured it in lost billions and realized that the same ferocious, loyalty-driven fandom he'd witnessed on world tours could be surgically transplanted straight into the fairways, and that single insight is worth more than most MBAs. But hold that thought tightly, because the real complexity snakes around the very next corner. Convincing a collection of gray-haired board members at centuries-old Scottish clubs to take a 20-something pop star seriously was, according to industry veterans, an almost laughable impossibility. They allegedly viewed him as a temporary celebrity tourist who'd inevitably get bored and crawl back to stadium spotlights. And the quiet, beautiful irony is, they were staring directly at a guy who was about to silently devour their market share without them ever hearing a fork clink. In 2016, Horan made a move that the conservative sports press barely covered properly. He co-founded Modest Golf Management alongside highly respected veteran executive Mark McDonnell, and insiders passionately insist this was no vanity label. This was a fully operational, aggressively hungry talent agency built to poach, nurture, and weaponize the next generation of golf superstars. Now, here's where your jaw might genuinely disconnect. Picture a completely unknown 20-year-old rookie grinding on mini-tours, practically invisible to the public, getting a call that Niall Horan's agency has signed them, and within 72 hours, a single tweet from their new manager catapults them past the six-figure follower mark, making apparel brands and equipment sponsors physically sprint to the negotiating table. Rival management firms were reportedly absolutely seething because they simply could not mathematically replicate that kind of instant, algorithmic amplification, and that reveals something deeply important about this entire saga. Horan wasn't just peddling golf, he was selling attention, and attention in this century is the hardest, most valuable currency on earth. But the tastiest, most intricate part of this story isn't just the talent pipeline, it's the moment he decided to stop renting borrowed influence and start quietly purchasing the actual infrastructure around him. That seismic pivot is exactly what we're stepping into next, and it's messier and more brilliant than any corporate thriller I've ever covered. According to reports, Horan began strategically appearing at elite Pro-Am tournaments like the prestigious BMW PGA Championship at Wentworth, but he didn't just wave politely at cameras and pose for hospitality tent photos. He legitimately competed alongside major champions like Justin Rose. And suddenly, television networks started noticing something deeply abnormal. His consistent presence was creating a measurable, sustained spike in viewership among exactly the high-income
premium demographic segments that major corporate advertisers would trade their corner offices to reach. That single data point, sources claim, handed him a quiet backstage key to the broadcast negotiation table, effectively transforming him into a walking, talking ratings multiplier that no executive could afford to ignore. Now, you'd naturally think that alone would be enough of a power move to cement a legacy, but he slammed his foot on the accelerator when Modest Golf reportedly secured an extraordinary partnership with Callaway Golf, the actual genuine undisputed titans of equipment innovation and high-performance design. And I desperately need you to understand this was not some generic stand here, hold this driver, and smile for a highway billboard kind of endorsement deal. Sources confidently claim this was a deeply interwoven strategic alliance deliberately engineered to fundamentally rewire exactly how golf is marketed to the entire planet, because Callaway's leadership reportedly recognized something that a million spreadsheet-wielding analysts had completely missed. Horan possessed the rare, almost mystical ability to make a centuries-old game feel accessible, urgently fashionable, and culturally magnetic. He was effortlessly bridging sneakerhead culture, contemporary luxury aesthetics, and elite athletic performance into a single scroll-stopping visual package that spoke directly to a generation the industry had practically abandoned as unreachable. When you sit down and quietly crunch the underlying economics of this specific corporate alignment, the architecture is frighteningly elegant. By seamlessly meshing his brand with Callaway, he allegedly positioned himself at the precise intersection of equipment innovation, global fashion trends, and unstoppable digital media influence, effectively funneling billions of dollars in dormant cultural capital directly into a traditionalist fortress that had absolutely zero immune system to defend against it. But this is exactly where most surface-level analysis runs out of breath, and they all miss the genuine secret ingredients simmering beneath the hood. According to behavioral experts who've closely studied his operational playbook, Modest Golf runs on an intensely personal, high-touch, almost family-centric model that directly contradicts the cold, transactional, asset-flipping culture that defines old-school sports agencies. Instead of treating athletes like interchangeable commodities to be coldly traded for a quick commission, he reportedly immerses himself in their psychological well-being, their narrative brand storytelling, and their long-term post-career financial architecture. The downstream effect is a fortress of almost cult-like loyalty that no rival competitor can even begin to penetrate, which perfectly secures his company's revenue predictability and, according to widespread speculation, makes Modest Golf an increasingly irresistible acquisition target for gigantic global conglomerates looking to buy cultural relevance they cannot organically manufacture. And I have to pause one more time just to fully appreciate the visual painting itself in real time. There are literally seasoned, decades-deep sports agents in astronomically expensive suits, reportedly sweating straight through their tailored shirts in mahogany-paneled boardrooms, furiously trying to reverse engineer exactly how a guy who once spent his early 20s dodging screaming paparazzi and singing about midnight memories to stadiums packed with teenagers is now locking up multi-year sponsorship loops they can't even get a phone call about. The entire ancient power dynamic has been silently inverted, and he didn't smash the door down with a wrecking ball. He picked the lock so quietly that by the time anyone heard the soft click, he was already inside, calmly rearranging the furniture and signing long-term lease agreements. So where does this dizzying trajectory actually lead? According to those closely tracking his next moves through supply chains and trademark filings, the expansion blueprint is already humming in motion, and it's audacious enough to make most Silicon Valley disruptors blush. Sources suggest the immediately upcoming phase aggressively includes golf course architecture, ultra-premium hospitality experiences, and fully dedicated media production arms, effectively constructing a completely closed-loop corporate ecosystem where every single dollar related to the modern luxury golf lifestyle eventually cycles through infrastructure he either outright owns or heavily influences. Imagine casually putting on a designer polo crafted via his fashion partnerships, swinging clubs co-developed through his corporate alliances, watching tournament content produced by his own media division, and emotionally cheering for athletes nurtured from amateur obscurity by his management firm. That's not a celebrity side hustle. That's a vertically integrated empire deliberately architected to dominate an entire global lifestyle category, and multiple Wall Street analysts are reportedly scrambling to build entirely new valuation models just to quantify the mind-bending metric of accumulated cultural equity that traditional balance sheets can't even capture yet. The real sting in the tail, though, the absolute final gut-punch realization that stitches this entire sprawling narrative together, is the mechanics of exactly how this managed to remain camouflaged in plain sight. The entire planet was obsessively watching Niall Horan the pop star, replaying his vocal runs and analyzing his festival appearances, and absolutely nobody was paying attention to Niall Horan, the emerging infrastructure architect. By the time the deeply entrenched golf establishment groggily awoke up and realized what was happening, he'd allegedly already stitched together a web of legal partnerships, broadcasting relationships, and talent dependencies that would take any